Now, I did mention I'm going to go in backwards order, even though this triangle goes to poking and space controlling to forward movement to whiff punishing. I'm actually going to talk about whiff punishing next, instead of actually talking about forward movement. So let's go back to over here and let's start talking about whiff punishing. Now, before I really get into whiff punishing, this I want to emphasize here is, while a very fundamental part of footsies, it's probably one of the hardest parts of footsies. The reason being that it is about reactions. A lot of footsies, a lot of whiff punishing is about reactions. I am a player, for example, who has very bad reactions. My whiff punishing skills are very poor, right? And something I established in the very, very first episode, if you remember, I talked about heart, I talked about body, I talked about mind. Heart being the, this feels like the right thing to do. Body being you have the execution and the physicality to do things. And then mind is understanding game data and stuff. Whiff punishing is a very, very body kind of situation, because you do have to have good reactions to do this. If you have poor reactions, you're going to rely more on the anticipation, on the reads aspect to help you through whiff punishing. But whiff punishing is generally a very reactive portion of footsies. And that's very, very, it's hard. It is hard. It's very hard to do, but some people are going to be better at it. There are some people out there who are like, dude, whiff punishing is super easy. I can whiff punish this move all the time. Sure, if you're one of those guys, wonderful for you. If you're Punk, one of the best Street Fighter players of all time, good on you. Not everybody is like that. So this section is a little tricky, because while poking and space controlling can be something that you can fundamentally learn, I believe, no matter who you are, whiff punishing is going to be something you're going to have to gauge your own strengths on, right? And if your reaction is not great, then what happens is you will have to rely on different aspects of whiff punishing, which I will get into to help you in the whiff punishing section. So to quickly show you an example here of what whiff punishing is, if an opponent does a button and they miss, aka whiff, as I mentioned earlier, they leave themselves vulnerable, right? As I mentioned, this is a commitment. While they're doing this move, they cannot block. So as they are doing this move, they cannot block. So if they miss, I have the ability to hit the opponent before they can block again during the recovery of their move. This is what whiff punishing is. So as soon as the opponent misses a button, you have the ability to hit them out of that move after it misses you. That is what whiff punishing is. So again, one of the key things to whiff punishing is, this is also starting to get a little bit into psychology here as well. Again, is understanding and reading your opponent patterns, right? I talked about hopetsies. I talked about people who like to hit buttons and things like that. If you can start getting a read on the pattern of which your opponent likes to hit buttons, this will help you with your whiff punishing a lot, right? And seeing what moves they tend to do and when they tend to do them. If you can do this, this will improve your ability to whiff punish moves, even if you have bad reactions. If you can learn to read opponent patterns very well. Again, requires precise spacing. This will be something that I'll show in a little bit once I get to the visual examples, the full portion of the visual examples. This requires precise spacing. And like I said, it is very reaction-based. You can put a lot of anticipation into it, which will help. Anticipation will always help your reactions. Will always help your reactions, right? However, there still is a large requirement of reactions. But if you are bad at reactions, anticipation will go a long way of helping you in that situation. So, the anticipations do help. Now, I did talk about how reactions are key, right? I will tell you this right now, though. If you expect to be able to play a fighting game And because you have the most amazing reactions, let's say you do have the most amazing reactions. Let's say you are the reaction god, that you can just react to everything. I don't care if you are the reaction god, because if you are, and you spend your entire game trying to whiff punish things only by reaction and not using any anticipation at all, you're not going to find much success. It's just not, you're not going to find success. I'll show you examples of this, but you really will have to learn how to bait opponents. A lot of this will be done by luring opponents into trying to hit buttons. So not only can you recognize opponent patterns, but you can also set the opponent up to whiff buttons in a situation that you clearly set them up for. And if that's the situation, it is that much easier to whiff punish something, because you can basically almost be guaranteed they're going to do that move. And like I said, I'll show examples of that. You can have specific setups that actually put you in position for whiff punishing. That set up something that I like to call auto whiff punishes. I'll show you examples of that as well. But again, if you try to react to everything, the problem that happens here is like, okay, you're like, well, this sounds great, James. I have great reactions, so I'm going to whiff punish everything. So I'm just going to concentrate on whiff punishing because I have the best reactions in the world. So I'm just going to try to whiff punish everything, and you know, the opponent won't ever be able to touch a button. The problem is that if you base yourself on reactions too much and do not use any sort of reads or anticipation, you're going to become too hair trigger, okay? So at the end of all these sections, I try to show you what the pitfall of this particular phase of footsies are. So if your opponent knows you like to whiff punish constantly with buttons, they're going to throw out other buttons to fake you out. So light punches, light attacks in most games are very quick. So like you'll see a character kind of go boop, and then they're done. They'll throw buttons like that out, and you're reacting to everything because you're the reaction king. So as soon as you see the opponent do something, you hit a button and then you miss, and then the opponent will take advantage of that and beat you up for swinging at something that you shouldn't have swung at, right? Think of it as a pitcher throwing a dropper, a sinker at you. You know, the ball's coming here and all of a sudden it just falls, right? They're baiting you into swinging because it looks like it's coming right at you, but then all of a sudden it goes away, you swing, and you strike out, right? That's basically the danger of trying to whiff punish everything, because you're just going to end up being too hair trigger. So let's show you exactly some visual examples here of how whiff punishing works. So here I showed you that example of exactly what whiff punishing is before, right? So again, whiff punishing requires a lot of anticipation and a lot of reactions, right? So obviously, if I have good reactions, as soon as I see that whiff, I can punch them in the face pretty quickly. But what I'm going to do here is not only am I going to make her do this, but then I'm going to make Chun block afterwards. So you'll see if my whiff punishing is true or not, okay? So I'm going to have this happen here. So if I'm too late, okay, that was in time. But if your reactions are bad, then you're not going to whiff punish them on time. That was on time, etc., etc. But again, like I said, you need reactions. And the nice thing about this is I have proper reactions to this because I know it's coming eventually, right? If I record Chun to do this and then block, or if I record Chun to do this and then block, for example, right? So let's turn on all of those things here. Suddenly, my ability to whiff punish that is going to be much harder because now I'm scared of other options. And now I missed. I was too slow. Too slow. Oh, God. Oh, God, I got punched in the face. And this is what I mean. Okay, I got it. But I'm hitting it on every button, right? So I'm hitting this on every button. And see, now all of a sudden I'm missing way more often because I'm scared of those options. I'm scared that, so my goal is to not hit a button when she does standing light punch. And so now I'm trying to read which one it is. And it all of a sudden whiff punishing becomes very, very, very difficult. Okay, so you can see why whiff punishing requires good reaction and good anticipation, right? And that pure reaction isn't going to help you at all, right? So that's not going to help you at all. Going back to the slides here really quick, if we take a look at the slides here really quick, one of the things that I talked about also is precise spacing here. It requires precise spacing. I've talked all about movement a lot. There's a lot about movement. I always talk about movement. And so I really want to show you this example over here. All right, so here I have an example here, again, of why spacing is so important, right? Remember I talked about understanding the spatial relation that you have to the opponent, right? One of Bison's best moves here, this is Bison right here, is this move, known as the Psycho Axe. It's a very good button, it has great range, and actually, even if I block it, I am now in a pressure situation. He has the advantage in this. So this is a great button because it reaches far and puts him into an advantageous situation, right? So you're going to see a lot of Bison players use this button. This is a very, very powerful button for M Bison players. So you're going to throw this out like this, and now you are in trouble. Now, if I want to whiff punish this button, it's not just about standing and just getting ready to whiff punish them. It's understanding what range I want to be away from them. Okay, so let's say I'm over here and I want to whiff punish that move. I'm going to guess that I'm going to stand right here so I can whiff punish it, right? Looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. Too close. No way to whiff punish it. I'm going to get hit. All right, all right, all right. Let's try standing over here. All right, now I'm going to try to whiff punish it. Oh, God, I'm too far away. I can't whiff punish it anymore, right? Spacing is such a huge, huge thing. And just by visually looking at the screen, I want to be able to know where I want to stand to cause that move to miss. So I'm going to back off all the way here, and I'm going to guess about here, right? Bam! Whiff punish. There you go. It's about that spatial recognition in order to whiff punish the enemy. However, and I'm going to say this again, you're going to hear me say this every episode, fighting games are a two-player game. It's not that simple as finding the space to whiff punish the button, because the opponent's not just going to hit the button like that. Right? What's the opponent going to do? What the opponent is going to do, and I've recorded the computer to do this, is they're going to be walking around a lot. They're going to be moving a bunch. And if they're walking around a bunch, all of a sudden, if I want to whiff punish that move, you guys can see how much more difficult this has become already. And this is why I say fighting games. Sorry, my bad, I'm looking at Street Fighter. Fighting games are a dance. This is why I say it's a dance. If I want to whiff punish that move, I'm reacting to the way he's moving, and I'm trying to stay at that magical distance. So if he ever does that move, I am in the range to whiff punish it. Do you see how my movement is reacting exactly to what he's doing so that I can try to be in that magical space for whiff punishing? So let's turn on this move. And if he ever does it, oh, there we go. And boom, there you have an example right there of whiff punishing footsies. There is a perfect example right there. You saw how all I did was try to maintain that space, and then as soon as he swung, I was able to stop it. And the only way that I was able to do that was to dance with the opponent, have the spatial recognition and the reaction and anticipation at the same time to be able to whiff punish that. And that is one of the key factors there. So you don't have to play on pure reaction, but if you stand inside that range of the opponent and to bait them and to tempt them into throwing out that move, and you are just in the right range, you can get the whiff punish. And that is basically one of the most important things about whiff punishing, is that kind of anticipation as well, right? Now, a lot of things that I do want to talk about. There's another one, for example. Let's do, what I want to do now is I want to record M. Bison doing this button here, okay? So, one of the things that I want to mention is, let's say you do fight an M. Bison player that really, really likes to poke with this button here, right? You see that they've gotten so good at poking with this button. Again, great offensive poke button, great range in here, right? So he's going to rely on this button. It's fast. It has good range. You know, it really, really controls that space in front of you, right? Well, if you look back on my slides over here, one of the things that I said was learn how to bait opponents. And one of those things was walking in and out of ranges. Now, obviously here in this example that I'm showing you guys right now, M. Bison is just swinging the kick, so I know when he's going to kick every time. But let's say I didn't know when he was going to kick every time. If I'm outside this range because I understand the spatial range of where that kick can hit, and then I know how far I have to walk in to get kicked by it, if my opponent has a hair trigger finger and likes to attack me when he sees me walk into the range of that kick, I can easily walk in and out of the range, right? And by natural human reaction, they're going to try to kick me because they see me walk in this range. And they don't want me to get into this range. So I'll walk in and out like this. Right? And if you walk in and out like this, it might scare them into hitting a button. And then at that point in time, it becomes much easier to whiff punish something because you're basically saying, oh, hit me. And then you know that button is coming. Like that. And so it becomes less about reactions and more about anticipation. Learning to walk in and out of ranges of your opponent like this to get them to hit a button is one of the key parts of whiff punishings. But again, I just really want to emphasize that this is a two-player game and that your opponent is going to be walking around like this, which makes it really hard to walk in and out of that range to bait them like this. And so then it becomes really hard to whiff punish things. Oh gee. Okay, that's great. I actually wanted to show you how difficult that is. Then there are situations, I mentioned this briefly, and I just want to show you an example of this. There's something called, that I like to call auto whiff punishes as well that are kind of nice. These are other ways at which you can bait the opponent into whiffing a button in front of your face and you being able to beat them up. And some characters are definitely better at this than other characters. Birdie is probably one of the most common ones that you will see. An attack that a lot of birdie players really like to use while they're playing in footsies as a poke, as an offensive poke, as we talked about earlier, is this right here, EX headbutt here. The reason why this move is a nice move here is because a lot of times if your opponent just isn't aware, you're just going to catch them off guard in that situation, right? You're just going to catch them all of a sudden, they're not blocking, and they're just like standing there, and you're like, do, and then pow, and then they just get hit by this. It's a great way to poke. But not only that, but against opponents who are less aware, the other advantage of this move is that it sets up something that I like to call an auto whiff punish. This is where the brain comes in. I talked about the 3 different aspects of a kind of player you are. Against players who do not specialize in that part, in the part that they don't know all the crazy frame datas and setups and stuff like this, you can catch a lot of people off guard with this. One of Cammy players' favorite buttons to press after blocking something is crouching medium punch. Okay, this is a really, really good button to press. if I block something, I just try to take my turn like this, right? So I do this, and then I do this button. Or I do this, and then, for example, I sweep, and then you can punish me, for example. I do this, and then you counter poke like this, right? Well, the problem with it is, even though Birdie looks like he's in range right there, even though he looks like he's in range to be hit by that button, you're actually not. Cammies will hit this button a lot. This will happen a lot to players who are less aware. And the reason why I like to call this an auto whiff punish is I can basically mash on my medium punch button after doing this, and it automatically times the whiff punish for me. This is why you will see so many people get hit by this. And then I can also add extra damage to it by doing this. There are a lot of situations that you can set up auto whiff punishes for yourself. You know, just understanding, baiting the opponents, getting the... This doesn't even require anticipation. I don't care if she hits the button or not. I'm just mashing on medium punch. And then, oh, I saw her swing and I get to hit her. This is an example of auto whiff punishing, which is also another way to set up whiff punishes as well. Let me show you one last example over here, just because this is something that you will see a lot from high-level players. In fact, this might be one of the most common ways that a player like Punk gets such consistent whiff punishes on everything, right? One of the most standard ways to bait people into getting hit by a whiff punish. So, one last example of baiting people for the proper whiff punish here. One of the nice things about the training mode in this game is that I can set the timing at which the opponent tries to counter something. So in other words, if I hit this button, I can do it in 10 frames, or I can set the thing to be 20 frames, and you see that it actually waits a little bit, right? So that's kind of a neat setting in training mode. But again, don't worry about the details of training mode or what all these numbers are and everything like that in training mode. I'm just explaining it so you're not confused by it or intimidated by all these menus, but I'm just trying to show you what I'm trying to set up here. And the reason why I'm setting this up over here is because one of the things that Punk will do a lot of the times is, you know, one of the ways to stop pressure, for example, is to hit buttons. So if I try to crouching light punch and move forward to go and apply pressure, the opponent will hit a button at me, right? This is just something people naturally do. I hit a button, I walk forward, and they counter poke at me. Well, what someone like Punk will do is they will know that this is what people like to do. So they'll poke, and instead of walking forward, even though they're in range here to get punched by this move, they'll walk backwards, right? So they'll just do this, walk backwards, and then they just hit fierce. This is, again, about reading opponent patterns. And look at that. I'm whiff punishing with this very, very slow button, right? And so then I can do this. I can do that, for example. Now I'm getting max damage out of my whiff punish because I've read the pattern that my opponent likes to counter poke me whenever I crouching light punch and then try to walk forward. Now that I've learned this and recognized this as a pattern, I can now low punch and walk backward. Like that. You will see Punk do this a lot. He does it a lot with crouching medium kick too, because crouching medium kick is just such a fast button. And a lot of the times he's setting you up for the whiff punish. So while Punk's reactions seem so amazing and his confirms seem amazing, a lot of it comes from that too. A lot of it comes from reads and understanding patterns and understanding human reactions to the point where he really doesn't have to react as much as a lot of people think he does. That is a lot about how whiff punishing works, is you're trying to set opponents up for it. You saw the example that I showed earlier when M. Bison was walking back and forth a bunch of times and then hitting medium kick, and then I couldn't whiff punish it at all, right? Well, if they're allowed to walk back and forth all day and then hit buttons, you're not going to get your whiff punish. You can get your whiff punishes a lot more if you can force the opponent into these kind of situations. Set them up for the whiff punish. Bait them into the whiff punish, and it's a powerful tool. And this also comes into with just recognizing their poking pattern. If you see the Chun-Li, for example, like the Chun-Li with the back heavy punch beating Lucia's move all the time, if you see something like that and then the Chun starts becoming obsessed with using that move, then you don't have to worry about their movement because they're committing to this move a lot. They're not moving. So they're standing still and doing this button a lot. It becomes very easy to whiff punish. So you start reading the patterns. You start reading the pattern that the opponent likes to walk up and try to hit you with a certain button. So as soon as you see them walk up, you walk backwards, they whiff their button, and then you can whiff punish it. You want to recognize the pattern. That's always going to be the key to whiff punishing. If you're just trying to go purely based on reactions, you're going to have a hard time. However, if you have no reactions, it's still going to be hard to whiff punish even when you do have the anticipation. So a lot of times you'll see a lot of people just kind of like guess whiff punish, basically. They're just throwing it out there and hoping that they hit the button and you hit them. And that might be something that you have to resort to, which I resort to a lot because my reactions aren't very good. But for the most part, this is why I said this is one of the more body sections of fighting games. This is one of the parts that requires something like physical that you have to be good at, and that is reactions. And that is whiff punishing right there. So let's get back over here. Oh, hi, Jasmine. Let's talk about the next section of footsies, and this is forward movement, okay? Forward movement is so important in footsies. And the funniest thing about this is that it's like, why are we even talking about forward movement? Like, that's just walking, right? I mean, it seems so innocuous. It seems like forward movement, okay. But this is such a fundamental piece of all of footsies that without forward movement, you will not win. Okay, now what is forward movement? There's two goals, and we've covered a lot of this already. One is to get in on the opponents. You remember when I talked about the Chun-Li poking example, where I hit enough buttons that my opponent clams up and starts getting over defensive, and that allows me to forward dash in. Once I've forward dashed in and my opponent is caught off guard, now I can be aggressive, and now all of a sudden I can apply the pressure. Right? This is the, let me take away the second goal there. That is the aggressive aspect of forward movement. Walking at the opponent so that your poke reaches them. I talked about how Zangief wants to hit you with that standing heavy punch, or that Rashid wants to hit you with the crouching heavy punch, etc., etc. This is all about being aggressive. You want to move forward so your pokes will hit the opponent. Now, I have talked so much about movement in this series so far of First Attack, right? Movement is so important. Movement is so vital. Well, here's my question for you. What if your movement gets limited? What if your movement options gets put to a point where one of your movement options is completely eliminated? And that is backwards movement. So this is the other half of, this is the other goal of forward movement, is using the stage. And I'll get into this part a little bit more details in just a little bit, but using the stage, this is the patient part of forward movement. And this is a very difficult part to not only just understand, but to perceive as happening. I'm going to tell you this right now. This is the scariest part of footsies, okay? Although this is so obvious, and this is so, well, I don't want to call it obvious, although this sounds so fundamental and so like, of course you want to move forward, it's the scariest part of footsies. Why is it so scary? Because you can't block while you're walking forward in most games. Even if you have a block button like in Mortal Kombat, if you're holding it, you can't move. So you have to let go of the block button to start moving forward. Right? So while you're walking forward, it's scary because you have no defense now. If you walk and the opponent hits a button, you just walk face first into it. So forward movement is absolutely terrifying. So for players who play nervous like I do, for players who play tense, it's hard to move forward. Now, for those players who are just crazy, which players exist, moving forward is like nothing to them because they're just moving forward the entire time. They're just like, I'm going to dash, and just keep coming at you. But for most part, moving forward is probably the scariest parts of footsies and requires the most conditioning of yourself to be willing to do this. I mentioned that one match that I saw that Automatic posted from Grand Blue Fantasy Versus where the opponent, the first thing they did was walk themselves all the way into the corner. They walked themselves all the way into the corner and then he died because once you're in the corner, guess what happens? Once you're in the corner, you can't move backwards anymore. Remember how I said when you want to whiff punish things, you want to walk in and out of a range? You can't walk out of the range of anything. You are stuck in the corner. You can't go backwards. Forward is the only direction that you can use to move forward. To move at all. Forward is the only direction. So if you're in the corner, the opponent has all of the control. They can go any distance they want. You can only move forward. You're stuck here. So now all of those things, my whiff punishes, my pokes, etc., etc., I never have to worry about you walking out of the range, right? I never have to worry about you walking outside of the range of my pokes or I can stay in that range where your move's going to whiff punish because you can't walk backwards and make it harder for me to guess which way you're going to go. Putting someone into the corner, using the stage is such an important facet of footsies. But again, walking forward is terrifying because as soon as you walk forward, you're not defending and you're going to get yourself killed. And so like I said, the goal of neutral is to put yourself into an advantageous position, right? Remember I talked about that flow chart again. Neutral, advantage, mix-up, combos, right? Neutral, your goal, I said in the neutral episode, in the last episode, your goal is not to hit people, is to put yourself into an advantage. Both of those two goals at the top are exactly that. If you can get your opponent scared, for example, and they are not hitting buttons, you can dash in for free. You can walk in for free. You can find all sorts of ways to get in on the opponent and start applying pressure if you are aggressive and continue walking forward at the opponent. So, I'm sorry, if you get them scared, you can then move forward and then start applying the pressure on your opponent. But like I said, pushing them back is a very, very important thing. This is a long-term investment, okay? I talked about using the stage space. This is a long-term investment, and it's really hard to feel the benefit. There was an episode that I streamed a while ago where I had two of my viewers play Samurai Showdown against each other, and one player was having trouble beating the other player, but they weren't realizing the success that they were having in neutral. They were pushing the opponent slowly backwards, but then they would give up that pressure. They would start moving backwards again and then give the opponent the ability to move forward again. And one of the things that I was trying to educate to the player was that you are actually winning neutral if you are moving the opponent backwards slowly. You are actually winning neutral. You're not hitting any buttons. You're not doing anything. You're just slowly walking the opponent backwards. And it's really hard to notice that you're doing this, or it's really hard to understand the benefit of it. But like I said, once you get them into the corner, that limits their movement, and that gives you all the pressure, right? And what's interesting about this, when I said when you're playing neutral, your goal is not to damage the opponent, but to put yourself into an advantageous position, this kind of falls into that as well. Walking someone to the corner sometimes requires you to take damage. If you think that you are playing fighting games perfectly. This is a jchensor axiom, actually, and it's not on my slide, but this is a verbal jchensor axiom. If you think if you play fighting games perfect every single time, if you do not make any mistakes, that you will win with perfects, meaning that you didn't take any damage. If you think that if you are playing the most flawless fighting game possible means you never take any damage, you are sorely mistaken. Because a lot of times, in order to win, you will intentionally take damage. You have to take damage. Because walking an opponent to a corner may require you to get hit by a few pokes once in a while. But as soon as you push them into the corner, that limits them. That applies your pressure. Then you get the mix-up. Then you get the combo. And remember in that first slide, there's that Okazeme. They have to have a saving roll. They failed the saving roll. And then you put them in another mix-up. And then they fail their saving roll. And then you put them in another mix-up. And you keep doing damage. So all that damage you took while walking into the corner was worth it. Was absolutely intentional. One of the most famous examples of this is Zangief versus Guile in Hyper Fighting or in Super Turbo, right? This is one of my favorite matches to play. I will walk and block Sonic Booms. I will block 15 Sonic Booms in a row, but the Guiles get scared as I keep walking forward, and they just keep walking backwards ever so subtly. Ever so subtly. And like I said, it's a long-term investment. You're walking them all the way back to the corner, and it may take 50 seconds of the round, of a 99-second round, and it just takes that whole time to walk them back there. But once you get them there, everything changes, and your advantage becomes so much more important. This also happens in Tekken, for example. Tekken is a great example. Once you put the opponent towards the wall, everything becomes different because now you get wall splat combos and they can't slide backwards when they're getting up off the floor. So a lot of times when you play Tekken, you are just trying to push them to the wall. Why is it so important in Tekken to have wall carry combos? Because you're trying to push people to the wall. In Soul Calibur, there's ring outs. If you get close to the edge of the ring, they can hit you and you just fall out of the ring, and no matter how much life you have, you lose, right? So if you're taking damage trying to move someone to the edge of the ring in Soul Calibur and then you knock them out and you win, who cares how much damage you took, right? So much about Footsies is about taking advantage of the stage, of walking people to the location that you want them to go and taking advantage of that screen space. Now, obviously, depending on the game, this is going to change, right? Tekken also has infinite stages. Infinite stages have no walls. So what's interesting is the Footsies kind of change very drastically when there's no walls when you play an infinite stage in Tekken. Other games like, for example, Marvel vs. Capcom 3, it's very easy to super jump and just try to get out of corners, right? You can still definitely get locked down in corners against the right characters, but there's a lot of movement options. In a game like Dragon Ball FighterZ, you have the vanish option, which will always swap you to the other side and get you out of the corner. Doesn't matter, it's still very important to play these positions because while they have those options to escape, fighting games are all about anticipation. If you push someone into the corner and they're scared, you know they're going to try to do something desperate like a Dragon Ball FighterZ Vanish. You know they're going to try to get out of the corner. And as soon as that happens, you don't even have to react to the vanish anymore. You can just be like, he's going to vanish soon, and then he does, and then you can punish it. Right? Pushing people into a corner is such a great way to induce panic and to cause opponents to make mistakes. And that's why forward movement is so important in Footsies. This is one of the hardest parts to grasp, is how much you are winning by pushing someone slowly to the corner. And it's so important. And watch some matches sometimes, especially if you watch Street Fighter V. You'll see a lot of players, when they get pushed in the corner, they'll jump out of the corner knowing very well they'll get hit and they don't care. That's how much they want to get the hell out of the corner, okay? That's how much it means to be stuck in the corner, how disadvantaged it is to be stuck in that position. So if you can learn your forward movement and push the opponent towards the corner, you are actually winning, regardless of how much damage or EX meter or whatever you're doing, you know, to accomplish. Now, one of the hardest parts about this is that if you try to walk the opponent towards the corner, they're going to get nervous and they're going to start hitting buttons to try to keep you out, right? So this also requires a strong read on opponent's nerves, right? You really have to have a good idea if you're fighting a very calm person, a very panicky kind of person, etc., etc. When you play against players, you really want to categorize them and you can start recognizing behaviors in people. So, for example, against panicky players, forward movement will scare them so much they will instantly hit a button to try to keep you out, right? Well, that's going to allow you to, we talked about baiting and whiff punishing, walking in and out. They panic and hit the button, you win if you whiff punish them, right? That's basically what it is, right? You've gotten them so scared to hitting that poke button that you just walk in and out and they poke and then you hit them, right? But if you fight against the people that are super, super patient, you can end up walking them a very, very long distance. You've seen this before if you've watched high-level Tekken. You've literally seen one player using a Mishima and doing this thing called a wave dash, which means they keep moving forward. And they just wave dash in the opponent's face. And even though the wave dash is vulnerable, because you can attack out of it, the opponent is so scared that they're not going to hit a button. And you see the opponent wave dash, wave dash, wave dash, wave dash, wave dash, wave dash, like 5 times in their face. And the opponent doesn't touch a button. But that's because the person who was doing the wave dashing had a read on the opponent's nerves. He knows the opponent is patient and not scared, and they're using that opportunity to push the opponent into the corner. Even though they're right in range to get hit by anything, they just know the opponent is scared to touch a button. This is what I mean by you have to have a really strong reading on your opponent's nerves, and you basically kind of suss that out. And once you do, you have a really strong sense of how far you can walk forward. This is something that Alex Vai is probably maybe one of the best I've ever seen at it. I could almost say he is the best at it. But Vai has this ability to walk at you, and he knows exactly when you're scared, and he hits a button, and he hits you while you're trying to attack. Like, he'll actually hit his button before you do, right when you hit the button, and beat you. He's so good at measuring the opponent's nerves. And that's the heart. I talked about the mind, the body, the heart. That is the heart right there. It is just about knowing, like, this guy is going to hit a button right now. And then you can punish them. And that is where a lot of that heart comes in. That is where something like a heart player like Alex Vai truly shines at, is the walking forward. And you can see it. He's so good and so brave at walking long distances and then finding that exact moment to hit the button as soon as he's gotten you scared. But that's why forward movement is the scariest part of footsies, is because it's just terrifying, because at any point the enemy can hit a button and hit you for walking forward. So it's a really, really kind of tough situation there. So, and again, I already mentioned this, but the reason why forward movement is not good to abuse is because you're not blocking, and you're going to walk and you're going to die. You're just going to walk into buttons all day, and that is not a good thing. So let's do some visual examples here. Let's go back to the training mode. Let's talk about this forward. Let me show you some examples of why this forward movement is so important here. Okay. I had this example for you guys earlier where I showed you guys, you know, me trying to whiff punish that move right there. And I'm playing this game where I'm trying to keep at the range that I can whiff punish like this, right? So I'm trying to sit here and whiff punish this. So I'm trying to I'm dancing with my opponent. I'm trying to stay at that range so that I get that thing to miss so I can whiff punish. Look at that. That's great, right? Haha, yes. What's interesting here, and this is actually going to sort of advance me to the next section here. Well, actually, it'll kind of get me back into this over here, I mean, I can really kind of start talking about this RPS over here, the Footsies Triangle RPS, because this is going to be a perfect example of where the RPS comes into play. So what's interesting here right now is that I am trying to beat my opponent by whiff punishing them, right? So I'm trying to beat them by whiff punishing them. In fact, if I use Lucia's sweep, I can probably whiff punish him a lot easier because that reaches really far and it's pretty fast, right? It's great whiff punish button. Great whiff punish attack here. Now, here's the tricky thing. What you guys haven't seen yet is that I've recorded 4 movement options for M. Bison. I've recorded walk forward very slightly, walk forward a lot, walk backwards very slightly, and walk backwards a lot. If I am the Bison player and I am aware all of a sudden that my opponent is trying to whiff punish me a lot, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn off walk back a lot. Okay? Now I'm going to sit here and try to whiff punish him again. And I'm dancing here. I'm dancing here and trying to dance with him. Whoops. And I'm trying to dance with him here. But you'll notice something what happened here just because I turned off that walk back option. Okay? You'll notice something what happened. Let's do it again. I'll show you guys again. Okay, I can whiff punish him, right? Oh, but now he's too close. And oh, shoot, I wasn't ready for... And it happened again. Guess what? I got walked into the corner. I got walked. In my obsession of trying to whiff punish this thing by dancing with him so much, because most of his movement happens to be walking forward, most of my movement ends up being walking backwards. So, if we go back to this Footsies Triangle over here, we will see that forward movement is beating the whiff punishing. Because you keep moving forward, I keep moving backwards because I'm just sitting there trying to react to you whiffing a button. And what's even more interesting here is if I notice that my opponent is trying to whiff punish my attack, I might just not do the attack at all. I'm going to turn off the attack here. And while I'm sitting here trying to whiff punish my opponent like this, like I'm slowly walk back into the corner because I'm dancing with the opponent. And I'm just sitting here focused so much on trying to whiff punish that button. And if he never does it and he walks forward and now all of a sudden I'm in the corner. Even more importantly, I can also throw out a fake button like so. Actually, let me do this button instead. I can even throw out a fake button like this. And then I'll turn that on as well. And so now while we're playing Footsies, I know he's trying to whiff punish that standing heavy punch. So I'm masking the fact that I'm not doing anything but walking him to the corner. So now I'm hitting light kicks, trying to get this person to think I want to whiff punish that heavy punch. And so he keeps hitting buttons to hide the fact that what Bison is actually doing here is literally walking me towards the corner now. He is literally walking me towards the corner, and yes, it's taking a while, but who cares? Who cares if it's taking this long? Eventually, you're back there. And like I said, it could take an entire 40 seconds of the round to walk the opponent there, but once you're there, you could kill them in 15 seconds. Just because you have the corner position. And for people who know all about Street Fighter V, they know once Bison gets you in the corner, it is terrifying. Bison will destroy you. So there is right there how moving forward beats whiff punishing. So if Bison does this, and I'm trying to whiff punish him all day, I am going to get walked into the corner. So there you go. This is how forward movement beats whiff punishing. Or because I'm not hitting any buttons, because I'm so intent on whiff punishing the opponent, because the opponent is so insistent on, oh my God, like on whiff punishing moves, I can sneak in and get pressure like that. In fact, what I should do is this. What I should do is this. Like that, okay? I'm going to try to hit Bison before he light kicks me. That's how you would stop it. So I'm sitting here trying to whiff, oh my God, like, I'm concentrating on whiff punishing, and then he comes in and attacks me out of nowhere. Oh boy, he has the advantage in that situation. Like, this is why forward movement beats whiff punishing. So that is why forward movement is so important to have. Forward movement beats whiff punishing. Now, if I know that the opponent is going to move forward like that at me all the time, what do? Well, let's go back to this chart. Poking, space control, beats forward movement. Okay, let's try that then. Oh, look at that. Space control. I hit him. And I'm poking at him. Poking at him. I'm hitting him now. Now all of a sudden forward movement isn't working well at all here. I'm just beating him up all over the place, right? This is what happens if you're overactive on the forward movement. This is why poking and space control works. Is because you'll hit people while they're walking forward. Bison just happens to have an invincible teleport, sorry. But I can also space control and anticipate him dashing forward like so. And that way, I'm actually beating his button. You saw a counter hit one time, right? So this is why poking and space controlling beats forward movement, right? So that's the next part of the Footsies Triangle. And then the last one is whiff punishing, beating those kind of buttons. And I had talked about that before. If the opponent wants to try to start hitting buttons to keep you out like this, right? Like if they're just trying to hit buttons to keep you out. So let's say Bison is the person here, right? And I'm trying to poke them to keep me from walking forward, right? So what happens is that Bison will walk in and out of my range, and I'll try to kick him on reaction. Oh, he walked forward. Oops, he walks into my range. I freak out, and then he gets to whiff punish me. So this is why whiff punishing beats poking and space control. See? So as soon as I see him walk forward, oh, I want to kick him. Now I get whiff punished. So whiff punishing beats poking, and then if I try to do this all day to keep him from dashing up at me like this, then that just means, you know, Bison's just going to sit there and be like, I don't care, I'm just going to kick you in the face, right? Like, but see, yeah, so if I'm just hitting buttons like this all day, I become an easy target to whiff punish if he dashes a lot. So if he starts noticing that I'm trying to hit this button with Lucia all the time to keep him from dashing at me, then he can just walk into range and whiff punish it. So again, back to the triangle here again. Whiff punishing beats poking and space controlling. Whiff punishing punishes you for hitting buttons. Pressing buttons punishes you for walking forward. Walking forward punishes you for trying to whiff punish. And this is how the Footsies RPS goes. This is what you're going to be spending a lot of your time while you're playing fighting games doing, is switching between these three categories of poking and space control, forward movement, and whiff punishing. This is where a lot of Footsies comes in. This is the Footsies Triangle that is so important that you have to understand. And it's tricky, okay? Because what's going to happen is a lot of people are going to ask me, well, James, how often should I go between the options? How often should I be forward movement? How often should I be poking? How often should I be whiff punishing? There's no magic formula. Remember what I said to you in the first episode. There is no right answer in the fighting games. Anytime you ask me this question, how much should I do this? How should I do this? You have no idea. Because remember, the entire time you are playing this game, it's a two-player game, okay? It is a two-player game. Your opponent is playing this exact same Footsies game with you the entire time. I don't care what game you're talking about. They are playing the exact same game as you. Okay? They're playing Footsies as well. Which means they're switching between those three triangles as well, whether they know it or not. Whether they are subconsciously aware of it or not. And the best players out there can switch between those on a dime. They can just go from the whiff punishing mode to the footsies mode, to the poking mode, to the forward movement mode. And they don't even have to think about it. This is, again, where that heart comes in. They just get an understanding, a read of what you are doing. And once they get that read, all of a sudden, they're just jumping between them because they know. This is where, like I said, a lot of where that heart comes in. You just can read the nerves on the opponent or the patience of the opponent, right? And you'll read a lot of this through the opponent's body language as well. And when I say body language, I don't mean you're staring at your opponent. I don't mean you're staring at the actual human, because you can do this online as well. If you have watched me play online, you will hear me say stuff like, oh, this player is a panicky player. Oh, this person's really patient, has good defense. Oh, this person likes to go crazy and dash a lot. You can read a lot of the personality of your opponent by their character's body language. And again, I don't care what game you're playing. You could be playing Dragon Ball and this guy's just vanishing and, super dashing at you all over the place, right? And you get an idea of what this person wants to do. You can play against someone who just sits there and blocks all the time. You try to fake a throw and they block. You fake a throw and you block. And you're getting an understanding that this person doesn't panic a lot. You get an idea that this person is very patient. So in other words, whiff punishing is not going to work necessarily as well on them because they're just not hitting buttons as often, etc., etc. There's so much you can read about a player through their body language in the game. And that's one of the hardest skills to learn about fighting games. But that's why in episode 1, I said fighting games are mostly a psychological affair. It's really about understanding human nature, understanding what opponents like to do. There's no magic formula for this. I apologize to people who came here to watch this and be like, okay, what's the magic formula for footsies? There is no right answer. And I said that in the first episode, and this is why. Because fighting games are a two-player game. Your opponent is doing everything to you that you are trying to do to them. And that's what makes fighting games so fun. That is what makes it so enjoyable when you are trying to outsmart your opponent and when you are trying to read them. One of the things that I've said is that fighting games are one of the most rewarding games. And trust me, there will be that one match as you get better in fighting games, right? There will be one match if you are slowly progressing, right? If you are slowly progressing and getting better, you will have that one match where you're not sure why it happened. But this happens to every player who plays fighting games and becomes very good at fighting games. You will have that one match where you fight an opponent and you're not even sure why, but you knew everything they were going to do. Everything they were going to do. You will know, you said you throw them when they get up. You throw them when they get up, they're going to uppercut. They uppercut, you punish them. Then you bait them into a button, you whiff punish. It's like for some reason, you knew everything they were going to do. And the first time you hit that match is when the magic shows up. That's when you're like, holy crap, I get it. Holy crap, this is fighting games here. When you are in that match and you outsmart your opponent and you know everything they're going to do, you're like, I don't know how I did this, but I did. And it's freaking fantastic. And then you play somebody else who's just as smart as you and they're doing the exact same thing to you. And then you find out where that real battle of wits comes in, and then you have a long session with that player and it is fantastic. It is just like, you can't believe the kind of mind games and subtlety that you guys are playing against each other once you both start understanding all of this. And it's so fantastic. So even though this episode is long, even though this episode has so many terms, so many concepts, so many things out there, I really want to paint to you what the end goal is, where the reward comes in. Once you start playing fighting games and really start understanding the neutral, this footsies game here, and once you start understanding it, it becomes absolutely amazing. Amazing. Now, the next slide I have here is different footsies for different fighting games. And what I was going to do here is I was going to talk about each of these games and talk about how a lot of the concepts of these footsies apply to the games. I probably would want to do a visual example of all these. However, it will take forever for me to do, and this lesson has gone long enough already. Let me know on YouTube in the comments below, or in the supplemental section of this lesson that's coming up right after this, if you would like me to do visual examples of all of the different games on how footsies apply to them. I can give you very, very subtle, quick summaries right now. Street Fighter V, like I said, Street Fighter V is one of the most fundamental footsies games. A lot of the examples of basic footsies work in Street Fighter V. Tekken is a little bit different because the character ranges are not hugely varied, right? So most people have kind of short range moves, and it's really about trying to apply pressure. There's a lot more mix-up potential in the game. You know, the ability to gain advantage is so powerful in Tekken because of the mid-low mix-ups, etc., etc. And, you know, even the fact that you have infinite stages doesn't ruin the Footsies Triangle because forward movement doesn't push them into a wall. But that's because once the opponent gets in your face, it's that dangerous, right? And then there's this whole concept of taking turns in Tekken, which really affects the Footsies in that game as well, and really kind of puts a little bit of a twist on the footsies as well. Grand Blue Fantasy Versus is more like old school Street Fighter, is more like a super turbo game because ranges really mean a lot. Characters can attack you from full screen from this part, and it's a very vastly different kind of game. And there's a lot of the game's mix-ups and systems are built into the game, right? So and a lot of the characters have their own rules to them. So the footsies becomes very character dependent. So Grand Blue Fantasy Versus is a game where the footsies varies wildly with the different characters that you play. If you play Fairy, if you play Matera, you're going to have very different footsies than if you play Catalina or if you play Gran, right? You're going to be very different kind of things. If you play Lancelot, your goal is very different than your goal if you're playing Vasaraga, for example. So Grand Blue Fantasy Versus is one of those great games that the footsies change depends on the character that you're using a lot. Under Night in Birth is a very interesting example of footsies because one of the things that I talked about is that forward movement is so dangerous in this game, in fighting games in general. However, Under Night in Birth as a series has a mechanic that allows you to move forward while blocking. Right? If you dash with buttons, you can hold down back and you'll dash, and if anybody attacks in there, you block. So that actually kind of changes the way footsies works in Under Night in Birth. Also, the grid system mechanic, and again, don't worry about these details I'm talking about. I'm intentionally being overwhelming with all this different thoughts and terminologies and everything like that. But the grid system will also change how you play footsies because there's a whole system in the game that kind of coaxes you into certain patterns and certain certain parts of the triangle just to win what's called the grid war. Dragon Ball Fighters is an interesting game because forward movement is largely kind of like the super dash. There's this whole move in the game that every character has where they just home in on you and just come at you and automatically attack you. It's like free forward movement that you're catching opponents off guard. And it's such a powerful tool. There's Vanish that I mentioned earlier that automatically swaps you and puts you out of the corner, etc., etc. So Dragon Ball has a very interesting take. And everybody has beams that they can shoot at each other from a full screen away and stuff. And so that really changes the footsies a lot. Mortal Kombat 11 is a very is more. I mean, it's interesting because MKX was less like this, but MK11 currently is a very Street Fighter 5-ish kind of footsie game as well. It's very spacing dependent. The game is very spacing dependent. However, with a block button, it kind of changes things. There's the ability to move and block a lot easier than it is in a lot of other games because you can just hold forward and all you need to do is hit a button to start blocking. So you can block things at the last second, for example. And that game has a lot of spatial defying moves where Scorpion will teleport back to this side over here. So while you're trying to play this footsies, he can just teleport over here and all of a sudden he's not in the corner anymore. So Mortal Kombat has a little bit more of the spatial breaking concepts in there. Guilty Gear is a taller game. There's more of a screen. So all of those ideas of controlling space, stopping the forward movement changes because there's a forward movement up here as well. They can high jump and air dash at you and that creates something different. You have these yellow Roman cancels that can slow you down, that makes it harder for you to space control and whiff punish and etc, etc. Games like Marvel vs. Capcom 3, same thing. Super high screen and poking all of a sudden becomes a very different thing. One of the things that I talked about in the space control was that, you know, if you want to do space control, you have to look at the angle of your attack. A game like Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is a perfect example. I showed Chun-Li standing heavy kick, having that high angle to stop you from jumping. But moves like, for example, Doom finger lasers, where he shoots lasers all the way up in the sky, is a different way of space controlling. You're controlling this whole giant section of the play field instead. So the footsies are very different, and you can also defend in the air and everything like that. So the footsies change in there as well. The reason why I wanted to bring this up is because you can see that the basic concepts of footsies apply to every one of these games, but they are so twisted and turned and dragged in different directions. That's what makes all these fighting games so unique. That's what gives them all different paces. It's what gives them all different feels, and it's what makes them all so great. Right? A lot of times you see people when they don't like a fighting game or when they talk bad about a fighting game, it's they don't like the way that game plays neutrally and through the footsies and stuff like that. But there are people who love it. And so, you know, this is a soapbox of mine. I talk about this all the time. I love all the fighting games out there. This is kind of one of the reasons why, is because when you see all the different games, you see all the different options that they offer you in the fundamental aspect of fighting games, it's just wonderful. You have so many options and they're all so enjoyable in their different ways. But they're all based off of the same fundamental concept, which is why you can see a player like Goichi, a player like Sonic Fox, a player like Chris G jump from game to game to game and dominate in any game that they touch. It's because no matter how different the fighting games get, this fundamental concept of footsies applies to all of those games. And that's why it's called fundamentals. That's why it's called fundamentals. And again, this is a very bloated episode. A lot of information here. I hope you guys can process a lot of this. If it is confusing, if it is a little weird, let me know. Also in the comments, I've made a couple of mistakes. I've edited things out. If I forgot to edit something out, please let me know. I can do so even after the video is uploaded. If I missed the section that I said I was going to edit out, let me know in the comments and I'll fix it later on YouTube itself. But before we go, before we stop this episode, there is a couple of things that I want to show to you guys. I want to add a little bit of extra stuff here, a little bit of extra stuff that you can go through and do a little bit of extra reading and research yourself here. For example, one old school contributor to the fighting game community, Magestros, aka I'm not even going to pronounce his last name. He, wonderful content creator from the past. Has his own site called SonicHurricane.com a long time ago. Big Guile fan, etc., etc. He created something called the Footsies Handbook. Okay, and the Footsies Handbook has been Bible for footsies for years for a lot of people. It is very Street Fighter focused, but it gives a lot of great concepts that you'll want to keep track of. You'll see the link here. I'll put the links in the descriptions below as well. But if you're watching this embedded somewhere else or something like that, you can just type exactly what you see here on the screen. In fact, I will increase the size of it by doing this. You can just type what you see over here. Another good resource that exists out there is a game called Footsies by HiFight. HiFight is one of the hardest working contributors to our fighting game community right now, and he created a video game that boils footsies down to the absolute bare minimum of what you can have in footsies. Literally, the game is about poking, whiff punishing, and forward movement. Like, that is the game. And you can check this out. It's available both on Android and iOS. It does cost money, but HiFight does such great work. I absolutely recommend supporting him on this. And, you know, you can also check it out over here on GitHub. Let me just do something really quick over here. I actually have the game on my phone as well. Let me show you this just because it's cool. So if you look at this, if you get it on one phone here, you can play 2 players on this game. It's called Footsies. So you do versus 2 players. You pick this. Literally, both players are seeing the same action over here. Oh, there you go. That was a kind of a decent angle. Like this, right? So one player's playing on one side and the other. There's an attack button over here. And then you move left and right over here and you play against each other like this. And basically, like I said, they've boiled it down to the most basic of fundamentals that exist, and it's actually really cool and will help you learn the basic ideas of footsies in a fun, interactive way. So definitely check that out as well. And then finally, there's a Domination 101 article by the immortal Seth Killian, who is one of the best professors of fighting games, one of the most influential members of the FGC. He wrote a bunch of articles called Domination 101. He created an article called Controlling Space. And in fact, this was the article that literally created that term. Nobody called it controlling space until Seth wrote this article. And now at this point in time, controlling space is one of the most fundamental terms for fighting games now. And he's the one that talks about it. So if you want to understand more about controlling space, you can check this article as well. It is a little bit outdated right now. One, Seth Killian is a lot spicier back then than he is than he has been in recent years. So you can definitely expect a little more snark in the articles. But secondly, there's a lot of references to Alpha 3 and MVC 2. Obviously, this article was written long time ago, so the references were modern back then, but still it talks about a lot of the fundamental ideas of what controlling space is all about. And so that's the end of this episode here. Long episode, a lot of information here. I kind of knew that it was going to be this way, but if you need any clarification or if you have extra questions, there are all sorts of ways you can contact me. You can @ me on Twitter, then I can respond, quote, retweet you and answer everybody else. Just put a hashtag First Attack in there so I know it's specifically referring to First Attack. You can email me at jchensor@jchensor.com, or you can find me here while I'm streaming at some point in time and just talk to me in the chat. So there you go. This is this episode. Again, I apologize this episode is so long. I know I wanted to make a lot of these episodes shorter, easily digestible, but this is a very complicated topic and it needs to have this full attention given to it. So if you did enjoy this, please let me know in the chat below. Let me know if this content is still good, helpful and working for you guys. Again, this is all me just teaching this off of my own understanding and my own basis of trying to create a syllabus and a schedule and everything like that. So if you guys enjoy it, please let me know in the chat below. Also, like and subscribe. And if you guys are watching this on Twitch and you appreciate this content, a subscription, donation, bits, all that stuff, also vastly appreciated as well. But again, if you're on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe. Hit the thumbs up down there for me, please, and let people know that you are enjoying this content. But that's it for this episode of Footsies in First Attack. Hope you guys learned something. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And remember, you cannot KO your opponent without your first attack. Thank you. I'm James Chen. And peace out.